Welcome to Free Exchange. I'm Howard Wall, Director of the Hammond Institute for Free Enterprise here at Lindenwood University. Today, we're going to be speaking with Jeff Small, who works for ELittle Group, ELittle Communications, which is the PR firm that the City of Ferguson has been using for the last few months. And thanks, Jeff, for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we're going to have a two-part discussion with you. I'm going to talk to you about the past in the City of Ferguson, and then my colleague Rachel Duchant is going to talk to you a bit about the future. You know, where do you see things going going from here?
Sure.
Now, so my first question is, I mean, my impression of the City of Ferguson is that it's kind of an unlikely candidate to become the poster child for all that's wrong in race relations in the United States.
Right.
So could you just give me a quick description of what the City of Ferguson was like, say a year ago, right, before all of these events happened?
Well, not only do I work there on a day-to-day basis, but I grew up in the North County area. Mother taught in the Ferguson, Florissant School District, so I was very familiar with that area growing up, and I always thought of it as quaint, small town with a pretty decent mix of different cultures and different races, and I thought there was always kind of one side of town that had been a little more revitalized, where different section, not so much, but still not anywhere that just seemed like a bad area or a problem or known problem area in St. Louis. I mean, I thought it was a nice community, which I guess is. And certainly still do, but I think, I believe I would say that there was always, I guess, maybe an undercurrent or some sense of feelings where everybody didn't feel as if they were on the same playing field.
Right.
But I guess it had just never presented itself as a big issue.
Well, and within the context of North St. Louis County, it was a pretty unlikely place. It was a place that would have been more integrated and kind of a more successful city than surrounding communities.
Correct.
And like you said, even like it's kind of has two main streets, almost like a white main street and a black main street, if I could just put it that way.
Sure.
But the both seem to have been very energized. I mean, still quite active and successful. Lots of small businesses with people from the community, and in the context again of North County, it was a fairly thriving place.
Certainly. And as I tell people, even when it comes to various issues with the courts or in particular the police issue, and it's such a large issue, but without having to single out a particular municipality, I can think, again, if you're from this area, surrounded by Ferguson are a lot of really, really small communities that all I can ever remember seeing the police cars is on the highway, where they're lined up, and that is what I know of as their policing, and I think just very small, poor communities where I wouldn't say there was illegal activity going on within those departments, but it always seemed a little shady, I guess, in my as opposed to a Ferguson where I didn't have that type.
If you look at the things that they measure, like percentage of revenue from tickets and fines. In North County, it's relatively high. In some communities, it's up to 50–60%.
Oh, yeah.
And Ferguson was one of the lower ones.
Very much
It was rivaling places, in West County that weren't on highways.
Yeah.
So it did seem that a lot of the problems of North St. Louis County and the city of St. Louis, and I guess all of America, were somehow landed onto Ferguson's lap because of unfortunate events.
Right. Yeah, and the events, I think it just brought, and I like to look at it in some good ways, is that it did bring a lot of issues, a lot of things that had not been talked about are now the conversations that are taking place here around the world, literally on a daily basis. And I say that, and people find it hard to believe that, part of my job is just even keeping track of how Ferguson is mentioned, when Ferguson is mentioned, where Ferguson is mentioned, and literally for the last 6 months there has not been one day that Ferguson has not been in the news, literally around the world. I think one day last week we were in India, Russia. I mean, it is beyond belief sometimes when I go to work and say, wow.
Well, I suppose, as Rachel will talk about, maybe the trick is then to turn that to your advantage in revitalizing. Now, one of the things that struck me was, so Michael Brown was shot on August 8th, and as always is the case, there's conflicting stories. It's kind of a mass of things flowing out. And months and months later, we get a clearer picture about what transpired. But a lot of what I saw as an issue was that it was a large PR problem in terms of the city, where no one grabbed a hold of the story just to kind of sort it out a little bit to kind of temper what was going on. So. But you were not in the PR firm at the time in Ferguson.
Interesting perspective. I
you
guess
had another interesting timing.
Yeah. So around that time, I have been, former life was former TV anchor, TV reporter for many years, many places, including here in St. Louis. Left that and started doing some PR and different things. But at that particular time, I was strictly on the outside looking in, watching things unfold. Like an ordinary person, however, I did come with my own background, so I kind of came with that eye. But I just remember watching on many occasions various people from Ferguson talking and just cringing and saying, "Ouch! Oh, wow! Probably shouldn't have said that. Bad thing." It just a lot of things.
I mean, from the Ferguson government,
right? And not nothing against them. It was just a lot of the whole public relations or dealing with the media's timing of when you say certain things or phrasing of how you say certain things that could be interpreted certainly in a negative way, or I might understand what this person is trying to say, but they probably could have chosen a better series of words to put together. Or sometimes there are certain people that are better at speaking in front of crowds than...
It's not always the one who's in charge.
Exactly. And so I just remember just feeling like, at that time I was glad I was not involved. I just said, man, I'm glad I'm not doing that thing. And then, fast forward. But no, I think it was just and in hindsight, I think you look at it that most small communities faced with a big issue like this.
Oh, exactly. It's not a huge community. It's the...
Right. You don't have a PR person on
In fact,
staff.
wasn't this the first police shooting in many years? And they were not really prepared. They don't have the infrastructure to deal with it. They were waiting for the county police to come.
Right. And for most small police departments, you deal with the media on a missing person or an accident, but again, nothing of this magnitude where very shortly after the incident, you've got reporters from all over, national reporters, and I think for any lay person, there's a difference when the camera's in your face and as opposed to a local camera. Then NBC National News is here. It's intense, and I think there were a lot of mistakes made in many ways, just from the PR standpoint at that time.
Now, speaking as just a community member and not North County, but I'm from West St. Louis County, and in the kind of the discussions that was going on like around the water cooler, it seemed like the African American community and the white community were just having completely different conversations. So the conversations I kept hearing were that dealing with the facts of the issue, right? So that Michael Brown was, it was a justified shooting in terms of the police rules. And the black community was talking about how it was, not justified and it was part of a greater problem. And the white community, at least as people I spoke to, kept focusing on the facts, which they may have been right, and it turns out largely that was the case, but that they were saying since the facts were this, then they were dismissing everything that was being said, and not that there were these other issues that were real, and this might not have been the best example of it, but that it brought out these other issues. Did you feel the same?
Oh, very much so. I mean, I think as an African American, as a resident of this community, I think I would say there's certainly been times that I felt as if just by my skin color, I drew more attention, let's say in a certain community, that just by nature of my skin color, someone may say, well, what are you doing around here? So, or even when I was in local television, there were communities that I went into that, I felt a certain way when I got to that community, but I don't think probably any different than if the roles were reversed, and if it was, some of my coworkers who would go to a different community, we might get an extra stare or two.
Well, I felt that going to Ferguson.
Exactly. But I think that there were so many issues related to just the shooting that I like to think that it did uncover just some areas that we didn't talk about, or we didn't talk about enough, or that we might have known were some problem areas, but we just didn't do anything about them. In particular, like some of the court reform issues that I think that now that they've been talked about, really raise some interesting questions.
Oh,
about
and there's actual things happening.
Yeah, right.
With court reform in the Missouri legislature, and there probably would not have come up.
Correct.
Except for this, and there are some serious problems, but everyone has known about them.
Right.
For years. Like you said, you know where the speed traps are on the highways. You know there are these small towns that's their business, is giving out traffic tickets.
Sure.
And these things needed to come up. And of course, since even the airport, 70 runs through North County, so it would have a disproportionate effect, and so on.
Right.
So, so I suppose, I guess if there is a silver lining, it's that there are things that have come out from this, tragedy, because it was a young man who lost his life on this.
Well, and I think people have at least gotten to the point of coming to the table. I always tell people, if we're not talking, if we're only, staying in our own little world, and there's nothing wrong with it. You have your day-to-day activities, I have my day-to-day activities, and you deal with a certain people. But if we only do that, we're not really getting in touch with. We can't really say we're diverse and inclusive. Whereas now, I think people at least are attempting to do a better job, per se, of that, or at least listening to someone else's perspective on things and trying to learn from them. And I think that is a very, very positive step.
Now, your firm started doing PR work for the City of Ferguson on what day was it again?
It was, it was late November, probably a matter of days before the grand jury's decision. And some interesting things, just the grand jury, the pending grand jury decision is certainly noteworthy, but then also the fact that the City of Ferguson had gone without a PR company for a good period of time, right before we had come in place. And so, I remember, first getting in, there were lots of calls that hadn't been returned, lots of emails that hadn't been returned. So it was literally hitting the ground, running, and just trying to get up to speed as fast as possible, not knowing what was going to come, no matter what the grand jury decision would amount to. Just would people, riot? Would people would? I quite frankly didn't know if I should be fearful for my life.
Well, so I'll have to stop you there, because this will be Rachel's launching point in the next segment.
Sure.
When we return in a couple of minutes, my colleague Rachel Duchant will continue our conversation with Jeff, talking about what's been going on in Ferguson more recently and what the future holds for the City of Ferguson.
Can you help me with this? My new dad teaches me all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
He helps me with homework.
That would be 3.6795.
Thanks.
Yep.
He helps me with my decision making.
I wouldn't use this one. Ever.
And he's even teaching me how to drive.
And that's why cars have bumpers.
I'm learning so much.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
Time to wake up.
I've got a job to do today.
I've got a job to do today.
Don't forget, you've got a job to do today.
Hey, Mom. I got the job. Thanks.
I've got the job. Welcome aboard.
Have a good first clown.
Your donations to Goodwill fund job training programs right in your community.
Feels good to start fresh, right?
Sure does. And like that, you're a job creator.
What do you think it would be like to teach? Chances are, you have no idea. Teachers today are breaking down obstacles, finding innovative ways to instill old lessons, proving that greatness can be found in everyday places, and that you don't need to be famous to be unforgettable. That's what it's like to teach.
Hi, and welcome back to Free Exchange, hosted by the Hammond Institute here at Lindenwood University. I'm Rachel Duchamp. I'm director of the Liberty and Ethics Center, which is one of the focus centers within the Hammond Institute. And where I am rejoining Jeff, who's been talking with us already about what's going on in the city of Ferguson. So welcome back, Jeff.
Thank you.
So we're really happy to be talking to you because I feel like you have been right in the thick of things. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I noticed when you left off with Howard is just how tough this whole situation must have been for you and for John ELittle, who runs ELittle Communications. Right. One of the things I wanted to ask you about before we got into the details of what's going on is how you and Johnny decided to take the job. I mean, right. I imagine it must have been quite an interesting thought process that you had to go through.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much, you know, and Johnny and I have worked together. We go back years when I was a reporter and he was a PR person for the St. Louis Public School District. So we've got a long history, and I remember, you know, getting a phone call from him, and I've been keeping up with Ferguson and
sure.
trying not to a great degree. But,
yeah.
But when he approached me with the offer, and I was like, really? And would you consider that? And he says, yeah, I'd consider it. And would you? And I was like, I don't know. And we went back and forth, and you know, I was just wrestling between, you know, kind of wanting to do something good if I could help, and maybe right. see if there was something I could bring to the table, you know, and then the fact that, yeah, this could be something great for my future if I was to get this position and be successful in it and handle it, if I could really do
right.
it and
right.
maintain some control. And then the other part is the fact that the real stuff that's like calling mom, saying, Mom, guess what I'm considering?
Right.
And Mom going, whoa, are
Lots
you
of
sure?
stigma around this issue.
Stigma, and then even the fact that I remember having a conversation with a higher up within City Hall who explained that, you know, they've had protesters show up to his house, to other department heads' homes, and
right.
You don't know if they're there to just hold signs or if they're there to do harm. Or,
so even your own personal safety.
Right, and just coming and going, and from the fact that I'm an African American, I knew that there would be, or certainly could be, you know, people who would consider that a negative or a really, really bad thing, and want to do whatever to let me know.
One of the things I really appreciate that I've gotten from you guys at ELittle Communications is a sense of really moving forward and trying to stay on the positive side. And it would be really easy to fall into an us and them kind of mentality, that there's this tension between the community and the city government. And so therefore, they're the enemy, or they're the enemy, right? And yet, if things are going to change, they've got to change together. There's no other way. If you want the city government to change, you've got to be talking to people in city government.
Exactly.
And so I appreciate the fact that you guys have stepped forward to do it, and I'm sure it was a tough decision, but thank you very much for doing it.
Yeah, no, and I think the benefits were, it took a little while to really kind of see that there is some light, you know, in this tunnel, but I think we've had numerous days where we've seen that, and I've been part of conversations with people who had either never talked or who their relationship was just very little of a relationship, or at least again now, you know, sitting down, listening to one another, saying, okay, we may not agree on this, but we can agree on this, or let's see what we can agree on. And that's the only way we are going to move forward, or, you know, instead of just staying in our own corners and
exactly.
nobody willing to give in a little bit, or even discuss a compromise or
Right, right.
or some
Because if you're
sort of.
if you're each in your own corners, then you're just complaining about the other one. But that's not going to change anything. One of the things that you and Howard were talking about is how, in a sense, ironic it is that this all happened in Ferguson as opposed to some of the other areas in St. Louis. And one of the things that occurred to me one day as I was thinking about our partnership that Lindenwood has formed with Ferguson is that in a way I wonder if it isn't providential. Because this issue with the incarceration, for instance, and bad treatment of Black American males is very real, certainly, and it really had to, I think, explode somewhere.
Right.
It was going to happen somewhere. And something that was interesting that occurred to me is that Ferguson is really a city that has enough socioeconomic diversity and enough resources and enough sort of strength as a community and trust within the actual members of the community that it strikes me that they might have more wherewithal to actually do some of the things that is being asked of a community to do to heal these problems, as opposed to a community that may be really struggling financially, for instance, or really may not have much diversity, all one race or all the other race. It strikes me that Ferguson may be well placed in some regard to really rise to the occasion. I don't know, does that sound like I'm reaching, or what do you think?
No, I think that's very a realistic perspective, and I think no fault of anyone necessarily in City Hall, but I just don't think that enough conversations have been taking place to make sure that everybody feels at least included in different things, and all, certainly there's the nicer area of Ferguson, or the more revitalized area, and then there's the other part, and I don't think as a business development kind of issue, or working well enough together, or making sure that everyone has a voice in these conversations about, okay, well, let's make sure we're doing better, or that you feel included in conversations about how to improve Ferguson. Because I think that the tools have always been there.
Right.
But some people, I don't feel like their voice even really mattered because of where my
right, and it may
is,
not have been on anybody's radar screen. Hey, this is something we need to take steps concerning. Do you feel like that's happening now?
I do.
Okay, can you give me some examples of some of the things that are going on currently, or that you see, that are in process, that are coming?
Well, I think one thing is that I know, and I'm certain that many city council members and some folks from City Hall were already, going to neighborhood meetings and things like that. But I think now, I would think it's a fact to say more now than ever.
Okay, yeah.
Neighborhood meetings will have at least one city council member or police officer is going to those meetings.
Face-to-face engagement.
Exactly, face-to-face engagement, and folks from our, from the city's community development office are actually going face-to-face to business owners or people who want to own businesses who didn't know how to dive through all the red tape that goes anywhere with opening a business, and they're able to say, what can I do to help you? And say, I know you got this great idea or whatever, but let me help you. Let me walk you through the steps of everything that you need to be an encouragement, as opposed to saying, we want you here, but figure it out.
Well, that's one of the things we noticed right away, because the DeRee Center for Entrepreneurship offered this Who Owns the Ice House course, and we were able to get funding for it. And the city was the first to step up and say, hey, we've got a list of people we want to send through that course. And so they were clearly already starting to really talk to the business owners who either wanted to start something new or wanted to ratchet up what they had another notch. And they actually provided, I think, almost all of the students for the first round of that class, and are continuing to send names. So I think that's really true.
Yeah, and I remember, I've talked to several of those individuals who, and just hearing how excited they were to hear that, Lindenwood was going to be offering something like this that, they might not have had the money to pay for, or just didn't really think that, their little idea was really able to be something, and to hear someone say, you know what, they all start with little ideas, or sometimes big ideas that you say, well, maybe scale it down a little bit, but you're on to something.
And I think when it comes to entrepreneurship, networking is so important. And so that whole notion of just increasing the communication between the different parts of the city is really important, along with other possible resources. Now, I know recently Pam Hilton, who was the assistant city manager, resigned. And so she's moving actually to my neighborhood, Richmond Heights. And so I'm wondering, what do you see happening with regard to filling the position of city manager and assistant city manager now moving forward? Do you see this as an opportunity to bring in a fresh face, or?
Yes, I do, and I think, I work with Pam a lot, and I think she's one person that I really hate to see leave just because, not just because of her as an individual, but she never wanted to be in this. There's a big difference in the assistant city manager position and the city manager position, where she had been allowed to just work and be kind of a nobody to a degree, and enjoyed that. Right. As opposed to being thrust into the city manager, where now everybody knows who you are, everybody wants interviews and those kind of things. And so now I do feel like, with the change of the individual, hopefully, someone with a fresh set of ideas who is willing and ready to be in that, in particular the city manager's position, knowing all of what it brings, but just someone who's ready to step in, knowing the depth of what they're getting into. Right. But I think there are those people who've dealt with these, and not necessarily the exact same issues, but have dealt with some tough issues in other places, and we'll hopefully get in and
have some vision.
Yeah, have some vision, and be willing to, again, sit down with different parties, with different entities, and all focused on how do we move forward. We cannot continue to solely focus on just the events of August of last year. And
it's hard to leave it behind, though, isn't it?
Very
So,
much
for instance, last
much
week I read that Michael Brown's parents are suing the city.
Correct.
And how has everyone reacted to that, or has that affected morale?
No, I don't. I think with something like that, it was said long ago that it wasn't a matter of
this is where it would eventually go.
It was just when, it was one of those things that, I personally took a lot of the calls, again, from around the world, because everyone, once that happened, everybody wanted to comment, and basically, all that can be said is because this involves pending litigation, there would not be much of a comment on anything.
Right.
As anywhere else. You got lawyers involved, now you let the lawyers
I hear you. I hear you, that makes sense.
But I think, on the other hand, even having said that, it is just that one, it's like you take 10 steps forward and then you say, oh, by the way, there's that lawsuit. But I think, the fact of the matter is, I think there's this is a period of growth. This is a period of change.
Which is always painful.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's always uncomfortable.
And I think people who believe in North County, it's not just about Michael Brown. It's not about just the police department. It's about North County. It's about this community that you love, that you want to see bettered.
Lots of history and strength.
And knowing that the changes or ways that we do things in this area can and will have an impact around the world.
That's right.
This is a conversation.
And that makes it exciting.
It is. It is. And I think to be, and that's what I tell myself literally every day, is that the tough things that I'm dealing with are the days that I say, whoa, that was a day. I mean, I've even started to keep a journal. It's like, oh, this happened today. But just knowing that, this could be, can bring about change in so many different facets of life for people around the world, young, old, black, white.
Absolutely, and we only have a few minutes, but I noticed at our recent community day that we hosted, which was so fun and such a great day, and I got such great feedback. The entire city council, who has just been voted in, was there. They had a little meet and greet in one of the rooms. I was able to chat with Wesley Bell, one of the new council members, and I really did get a sense of excitement about and togetherness from the whole thing. And you've got 2 African Americans now on the city council, and they seem to get along very well with the mayor and with each other. And so, just that sense of kind of, hey, maybe we can really do something big here, and the eyes of the nation are on us. So what are we doing next? I know Bell is working on court reform, and I don't know if you can fill us in on anything else that the new city council members are working on.
Yeah, I think just from the one thing that I've just noticed is just that, for instance, for Community Day, Miss Ella Jones, she and some of her staff were out going door to door to people, handing out information about Community Day and different things about the city that, again, like you said about that face-to-face interaction.
It makes such a difference.
And it's not to say that the former council members didn't, do some of that, but I think, again, perception is everything. And just from somebody knowing that you've taken time out of your busy life to come door to door, meet me, say hi, I think it's wonderful. And I think, more folks went out to vote in this particular election, city council.
Quite a few
than ever.
more. Exciting.
The numbers weren't great, but it's a starting point. It's I think something to tell, in particular young people, that when you go vote, change happens.
It makes a difference.
When you don't vote, things just happen around you and without your input. And I think it's a starting point that I think will only get better. We'll see more people vote and more people get involved.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really meaningful discussion, and I hope you'll check out our other shows on our website at www.lindenwood.edu/Hammond Institute.